Hi, I'm Laura Rolfe, host of Powered by Franchising and CEO of Mint Franchise Consultants. Today we have a more serious topic on franchising, the legal review of franchise disclosure documents, of franchise agreements, and what to look for in the legal review of the franchise agreement before you sign on the dotted line. And so I have Kit Higgs joining me today. He is a franchise attorney and legal expert. Welcome to the show, Kit.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate being on here. Thank you.
Well, so good to see you again and connect with you. We met at a franchisor event about a year ago, Rolling Suds, one of the brands that I love working with, one of many. And so I was introduced to you there, and several of my clients, I've referred them to you over the last couple of years. So glad to have your expertise. Originally, you started, though, as an assistant prosecutor. How did you get started in law and then transition from prosecution to franchise law?
Well, great question. I think if you interviewed anybody that knows me, they'd say, "Oh, I'm not necessarily argumentative, but I'm very opinionated." So I think law school was kind of a natural course for me. But my father was an attorney, and I always really liked law and in history, and so I decided I wanted to go to law school a little later in life. I was maybe 27, I think, when I first started law school. So I'd had a couple other jobs beforehand. I was in politics. Ugh, I don't want to go there now, and did a couple other things, worked in public relations, and always knew I wanted to go to law school, but wasn't sure what I wanted to practice. And so I started working. I was a prosecutor in child abuse and juvenile delinquency, and really enjoyed the job. Obviously, the subject matter was difficult, but I had a badge. I was investigating cases. It was like Law and Order. I mean, it's just like you see on TV. So really enjoyed the job. Unfortunately, it doesn't pay well, and I've got a lot of law school debt. So it just so happened I got approached by a friend who started a franchise sales organization. They started this company called St. Gregory Development Group, if you remember them.
Mm-hmm.
And so my buddy Todd Kirby started this company and said, "I want to hire you. I want you to be our lawyer." And I said, "Great, doing what?" And he said, "Franchise law." And I said, "Wait, hold on. I don't know anything about franchise law." And so we started talking, and everything sounded great, except I didn't know how I could provide advice and guidance on a subject I knew nothing about. So I turned him down. And then later on, a couple of weeks later, I was having friends or beers with a friend's dad after court. He got me the job there and told him I got this job opportunity. And he said, "You should take it. Sounds like a great opportunity. You can work in entrepreneurial pursuits, and money's not bad. But and the subject matter's fun." And I said, "That's actually why I decided not to take the job, the subject matter. The FTC regulates this. That's a no-go for me." And he said, "Hey, don't be intimidated by that. It's just like any other subject you learn in law school. Just go read, talk to people, ask questions, go to seminars, do everything you did in law school." And so he really broke it down and made it sound really simple. So by the end of the beer that I had, I basically decided I wanted to take that job. And so I called Todd back up, said, "I want to take the job." He had already offered it to someone else. So I then was able to get into the job a couple months later when that person didn't work out. And so that's my introduction to franchise law. So I started as assistant general counsel for St. Gregory Development Group. And what I was originally doing was just making sure that the sales presentations and all the discussions that we were having on behalf of franchisors followed the FTC rules and regulations. There's a strict line, you can't cross it. And if you know people in sales, they typically get very close to it. And so I'd say, no, we can't say that. So I was really learning about general franchise law and franchise sales. And that's how I get started was with St. Gregory Development Group.
Well, excellent. Yeah. And once we get into franchising, it seems like we never leave. So
Yes,
here
exactly,
we both are,
exactly.
maybe in a little bit different roles than when we first started in franchising. But I love that franchising is governed by the Federal Trade Commission, because it gives a little more, I don't know, a little bit more security, a little more guidance and rules that all franchises have to disclose the same 23 items. Doesn't matter what franchise you're a part of. There's a couple of exceptions of where they don't have to include financial earnings claims if they're an emerging brand or if they don't have the data or they choose not to. But in general, if you're in franchising or looking at a franchise as an entrepreneur, then they're set up the same way. So what kind of guidance or what have you learned in franchising that might be beneficial for clients that are looking at investing in a franchise?
Well, I've got two great pieces of advice. Hire a consultant and hire a franchise disclosure document review lawyer. Those are the two best pieces of advice I think I've got. Work with somebody that knows about what brands are out there, can walk you through them and match them to your personality and your goals. If you're going out there and doing a Google search on your own, I mean, good luck. I mean, you type in, I want to buy a franchise, and you're going to get a wide variety. So I highly suggest that you hire a consultant because literally the last 2 years of FDD reviews that I've done, I've reviewed over 400 FDDs. The red flags that I've thrown for brands from these clients of mine that go out and find their own franchise systems. They're working with a consultant maybe, but then they go out and find a brand on their own. Oh my gosh. I mean, those reviews are awful. And you really can tell the difference in quality in these franchise brands because they've already been run through. If you're working with a consultant, they've already been run through a series of filters. So they filter out that really, I mean, the shady ones. The reason why the FTC had to get involved to regulate the business was because of bad franchisors. And so working with a consultant already filters out a lot of that.
Yeah, I'm part of the FranServe organization, and we feel that it's very important to vet the franchises. We have a lot of opportunities to go to learning events where we meet with franchisors in person. We get to meet with some of the franchisees and we can do validation through that. We also go through the franchise disclosure document. So we have a preview in addition to reading the documents ourselves for brands that we have clients that are seriously interested in them. So we can weed through some of those that might be a little iffy if they've had a lot of closures in that we see in item 20. That is a huge red flag. Or they've had such tremendous growth. Are they having trouble opening some of the franchises that they had signed the year before or the last 3 years? So those are things that we need to make sure that our clients have their eyes wide open. And I'm not a franchise attorney. So I always recommend that, while I can give some guidance on it, I always recommend a franchise attorney review any legal documents and advise clients on what they should be expecting before they sign an agreement and any red flags. Are there any other red flags that you like to highlight or provide an overview as you're doing that overview for candidates looking at a franchise?
Well, really, it's the red flags that I see. It comes in a variety of ways. I'm looking obviously at everything I can. It's not just the FDD. Maybe it's me going and looking at lawsuits that have been filed against the franchisor, because when you look at item 3, litigation, and there are some lawsuits that the franchisor discloses that they're required to disclose, and you see these lawsuits and you think, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Well, some of these lawsuits are actually beneficial to the franchise system. If you've got a franchisee that's going out there and competing against the franchisor, they're also competing against other franchisees too. And so litigation against a competing franchisee that has left the system and is violating the non-compete or violating trade secrets and confidentiality, they should, go after them and prevent them from harming the system. And so you really have to look at every aspect of what you see in items 1 through 23. But you mentioned item 20 in units and locations, franchisees and company-owned locations, and looking at how many have exited the system in the last 3 years. How many transfers have they had? How many closures, terminations, ceased operations for other reasons? You take a look at all of those and kind of combine it together and see, all right, do I see a lot of flags here just in general? And are some of them elevated to be yellow flags or red flags? And if I see a lot of yellow flags, that equals a red flag. And some of these are small. Some of these are, if I'm doing a review and I see a lot of grammatical mistakes and formatting issues, where it goes from section 8B to section F, and you're wondering, am I missing some part of the document here? I don't like that. And if you see it a lot, that indicates the franchisor maybe is not detail oriented. And you need to be detail oriented in franchising because everything that you do is multiplied by a factor of X. If you screw up one time and you've got 100 franchisees, well, that's 100 screw ups. So you want to make sure that everything is buttoned up tight. So when I'm reviewing franchise disclosure documents and I see a lot of errors and grammatical mistakes, I'm thinking, all right, who wrote this? And I'll go look and see, hopefully, potentially actually see if I know those lawyers or that law firm, and maybe they're having a bad day. That really, I'd look at everything when it comes to the review, and I can't give you specific examples of red flags that I see. Well, I mean, there was one that I saw a couple of years ago where the only executives listed in item 2 were husband and son, father and son. The father just got released from jail. And so they disclosed that. It's the first time that they disclosed that in item 3. I've never seen litigation and be disclosed where they talk about the executive having been arrested for, I think it was a felon in possession of a firearm, something pretty crazy. And his son was the VP of franchise development. And if you looked at his bio, the son had just graduated from high school. And then you look at item 7 and you see the buy-in, the estimated initial investment was $1 million.
Wow.
And so, you add these two together and you think, what are you buying here with this franchise? I mean, those are red flag. So those are 2 instances where it was pretty clear to me that this franchise system was not up to par.
Sounds like it. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so imperative to have a franchise attorney review the documents before signing. I have a lot of candidates who say, well, I have a business attorney. I have a friend who's an attorney who will review it. It'll be fine. So what advice would you have to people who have an attorney on retainer? Why work with a franchise attorney specifically to review documents?
Great question. So last year I had 5 attorneys that I did reviews for. There are 5 attorneys that are in other specialties of law that hired me to do the reviews. One was an M&A attorney in Wall Street. He looks at $1 million, billion-dollar contracts. He has never looked at an FDD before. Didn't know what he was looking at. Said, I need an expert. You don't go to a brain surgeon for heart surgery. You go to the right specialty. And so hiring a franchise disclosure document lawyer or franchise lawyer in general is the best place to go because it's not a typical contract. It's very different. But I do recommend that you go with an attorney that you trust. So if the attorney that's your neighbor, if you trust them and they know this area of law, great, hire them. I'm not offended if somebody says, oh, well, yeah, my neighbor actually does FDD reviews too. I'd like to hire him. Great. Absolutely. Go with them. But go with somebody that knows FDDs, knows franchise law. Don't just go with a contract lawyer because they're going to mark this thing up. And I've seen it before. When I was general counsel of Cycle Bar, there was a lawyer that came to me and said, I'm representing this client. I want to hop on a call with you and go through the FDD. And we scheduled an hour for this. And so I was prepared. So he sent me over, though, prior to the call, 8 pages of changes that he wanted to make. And he included case cites. And so this document probably cost $10,000 to draft. He probably had 3 associates working on it with him. I mean, it was amazing. And I read it and I thought, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. The problem is we weren't going to make any changes. So I said, this looks all great. I understand everything your client wants, but we don't make any changes. We want all the franchisees to be operating off the same documents. And if we make one change, that's going to really kind of gum up the system. And so I went through each one of his points that he wanted to bring up and discussed why we weren't going to make a change for that particular instance. And that was an example where this contract lawyer came in and, again, he had really great points, but he didn't understand that doesn't fly in franchising.
Right.
You can't go in and say, all right, well, I'm going to, the royalty you're charging, that's too high. A comparative brand charges 6%. So we want it to be 6%. I said, good luck. We're not changing that. It's different. So go with a lawyer that actually knows what they're doing.
Right. Well, in franchising, it's proven systems and everybody follows the same rules and the same royalties, the same franchise fees. I mean, there's some exceptions. If you're a veteran, you might get a veteran discount or a first responder discount, but those are clearly stated in the franchise disclosure document. And as a franchisee, I want to make sure that we're all treated the same, whether we're franchisee number 20 or franchisee number 200. That our FDD, it might go through some evolutions over the course of years, but it's uniform for everybody who signs at the same time. I think that's
Yes.
very, very important. So what are some of the risks if you don't have a legal expert in franchising review a franchise disclosure document and agreement ahead of signing?
Well, you're signing the contract blind. And I don't know if I'd ever sign a contract without reading it. I mean, especially if you're investing your life savings into this, you're making a career change, you're investing any money in this. You should definitely talk to a lawyer and have them review this document, because although they may say, you know, the franchisor is typically going to say, yes, we don't make changes, they may make some changes for you. And I can't predict that. And so if there's an area that I suggest that you ask them about a change, maybe something that really is bothering you, ask it. Because the worst case scenario is going to be they say no, but you're at least going to get an understanding of what the rationale is behind that. And so you can understand, all right, okay, well, they don't want me to change because of this. It's not just they're saying no. You know, when I talk to my kids, I've got a 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and 5-month-old. With our 4-year-old, I can't just say no to him. I've got to tell him no and why he can't do a certain thing. Mm-hmm. And so if you get the proper explanation, then you can understand, oh, okay. And then hopefully maybe you don't do it again if you understand the why. So it's really understanding what you're getting into, because once you buy the franchise, you know, it's hard to get your money back after that. And you've signed a 10-year agreement. They're expecting you to go through training and maybe sign a lease, buy equipment, buy a car. It's hard to undo that once you're in it. So make sure you do as much as possible, as much research, talking to franchisees, working with a consultant, and working with a franchise lawyer to make sure that you've got better odds at success.
Are there any clauses in a franchise disclosure document that tend to surprise a lot of the clients that you work with, Kit?
Sure. Well, the liquidated damages clause is the most typical one. If they're not familiar with what a liquidated damages clause, I'll need to explain it. But I think most of my clients actually have heard of a liquidated damages clause. But if they haven't, I'll point it out to them and say, all right, you know, if you terminate the franchise agreement early, or if the franchisor terminates it, you could be exposed to having to pay damages based upon how much time you've got left in the term. And I explain it to them the same way I explain it to franchisees in Cycle Bar or at Cycle Bar. You know, I had a liquidated damages clause in our documents to protect the franchise system. If you're doing really bad things against the franchise system and you harm it, they're going to pursue you for those damages. And that's what a liquidated damages clause is. It's the nuclear option, but it's only used in really bad cases. It shouldn't be used against you if you operate your franchise and things don't work out. It's not going to be used against you. Right. And so it's really understanding why that tool is there. The liquidated damages clause is a tool. It helps the franchisor prevent damages against the system. And so if you understand why it's there, then you can understand why the franchisor needs it and won't make changes to it. So liquidated damages is probably the most common thing that I point out that is an area of liability that is really misunderstood, and people don't understand why it's there or what it can do.
Yeah, and I find also in item 6 where those ongoing fees, people look at and they start adding up all the fees in an item 6. And I'm like, well, most of those fees you're never going to pay. Like, are you planning on bouncing a check? Are you planning on being late with paying your royalties? Any of those kinds of things? Or if you transfer or terminate, there's usually a monetary amount in there. So you don't have to predict those when you're signing the agreement. You might think about an exit strategy. What is your exit strategy? Are you thinking you're going to own this franchise for 10 years or maybe build it up and exit it in 5 or 6 years? Those are conversations that you should be having with your franchise attorney and early on. And that's when you should look at those item 6 numbers in a little bit greater detail. But those aren't going to be paid every single month in general.
Exactly. Yes, you bring up a great point. And I bring that up to my clients. I say, look, Yeah, the franchisor says we may charge a fee for this, and then I'll give them a real world example. Oh, when I was general counsel Cycle Bar, I would never charge that for extension fees. Typically,
Hmm.
there may be an extension fee if you don't get open within, let's say, 180 days. The franchisor can charge you a $2,500 a month extension fee, and people look at that and think, oh, geez, I don't know if I'll be able to get open in 180 days and I'm going to have to pay this extension fee. And I'll say, well, sometimes franchisors may charge that. Sometimes they'll waive that. And I always waived our fee. As long as you got open within a reasonable time. I understand there could be issues, real world problems. You broke your leg, your kid's sick, you're in the hospital and you couldn't hire a broker because of X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be. We'll grant you an extension, a reasonable one, as long as you're using some efforts to get open.
Right.
So it's just understanding what they can do and making sure that you're not blindsided by a fee. Oh, I didn't know. I wasn't aware of that fee. I didn't know you could charge me that. Well, it's actually in the FDD.
Yeah, well, the franchisor doesn't want to tie up a territory either. If you buy a territory and then you just sit on it, that
Yes.
isn't good for the system either. So
No.
those are some of the reasons why they have some of those clauses in there, just in
Abs-
case. But if you're talking to your coach regularly, you're following steps, you're moving forward with the system. I've seen those extensions happen without any pre-penalties or confusion there.
Absolutely. And I don't want to be a traffic cop.
No.
I want to help you, target your customers and be legally protected. I don't want to have to write tickets. I mean, it takes time to write a ticket. If I have to send a default notice out, it'll take, a half an hour, an hour. And then, I've got to actually do research on it beforehand. That takes an hour. So, I mean, maybe a couple hours to write a default notice to tell you not to do something. Also call you up and say, hey, all right, don't do this. But then I've got to formalize it, put in writing. That costs money and time. And it's better used actually to go out there and do what you're supposed to do. Follow the system, sell to the customers, and that's it. Just operate your franchise.
So I do have some candidates who get a little bit intimidated by the franchise disclosure document. And so I like that you had said working with a franchise consultant is very helpful because we as consultants know that those documents can get to be several hundred pages long, particularly if it's a long vetted, it's been around for a long time because they list all of the franchise locations and they just have a lot more lingo. If there's other franchises within an FSO, they've got to include those in there. So if somebody gets a little bit overwhelmed, how do you break down the FDD to make it more digestible and not so intimidating?
Well, it's just explaining it and giving real world examples and understanding why the franchisor wrote it that certain way. Because the document is there to protect both the franchisor and the franchisee in the franchise system. So if you really understand why it's there, you'll be less intimidated about it. I go through the documents cover to cover to make sure that my clients know we've gone through everything. And they ask questions while we're going through literally each page of the document. I want to make sure I cover every single question you've got, big or small, no matter how stupid you think it is. And I hear a lot of questions like that. Oh, well, sorry, I've got a stupid question. I don't like hearing stupid question. Every question that you ask is important to you. So ask it. There's no stupid question. And because I want to make sure you feel comfortable moving forward, that you left no stones unturned before you bought this franchise. And so it's just making sure they understand as much as possible.
Yeah, I love that you provide that clarity of everything because, like you said, there are no dumb questions in a legal review of a contract. We want to make sure that you understand every element that you're signing and you're agreeing to as a new franchisee. So there are no surprises that come up. We would rather have you understand everything fully at the very beginning before you put your pen to paper and then to move on from there. And you feel a lot more comfortable. And oftentimes the spouse is required to sign the franchise agreement too, not in all cases. But we want to make sure that the spouse also understands everything. So I encourage if every step of the way that you involve the spouse in conversations with the franchisor, conversations like the validation calls, if you can bring them to a discovery day or in-person meet the team day, then your spouse will understand what that legal responsibility looks like for them as well. We had an unfortunate incident where one of the spouses passed away and the other spouse is responsible for the franchise, and they're not exactly sure what is like how to move forward with that without the other half.
Yes.
So having clarity at the beginning is really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for those multi-unit investors, we're seeing a lot of people who want to quit their full-time job and invest in building an empire or build in opening multiple units. What are some special things that you might advise them in signing a franchise agreement with opening the territories and those timelines, or any other advice that you would give those multi-unit or multi-territory owners?
Well, typically with multi-unit owners, I mean, obviously well, not obviously, the most important part really is the development schedule and the development agreement. And most franchisors will have very set periods. You have to have the franchise agreement signed by this day, 6 months, 9 months later, and you've got to be open 6 months or 9 months after that. So every year you've got to get one location open essentially. And franchisors are really not going to move that development schedule. And I typically get multi-unit owners saying, all right, I need to talk to them about the development schedule. They're offering me 12 months to open up each one. I think I'm going to need 18 for my first one, and then 24 for the second one. And so I'm going to go back to them and tell them we need to change all this. And I'll say, great, go have a discussion with them about it. And they're probably going to tell you, we're not going to change the development schedule. We'll give you an extension or waiver to get open when you need it, if you need it, and we know what the reason is for it. But we're not going to modify it right now, because if we gave you 18 months to open up your first one, you're going to take the full 18 months. And then that's going to delay everything else. The franchise system needs to, or survives based upon franchise locations being open. So they want you to get open as quickly as possible. So really kind of tweaking the development schedule doesn't necessarily happen, but you certainly need to ask them about it, because they can tell you, all right, well, our average franchisee is taking this long to get open, and you really should be able to get open within that time frame. And so it's just making sure you understand what each party's expecting, because it's a partnership. And if you're having any delays getting open, just make sure they are aware of it. The only time I've defaulted a franchisee and actually terminated one because they didn't get open was they didn't respond to me. They bought the franchise. It was probably one of the strangest cases I've had, or incidents with franchisees. This couple bought this franchise, went to training, I'm pretty sure, and then just disappeared. And when it came time to finding their site, I reached out and said, hey, look, you haven't reached out to our real estate team and we haven't heard from you. And I heard nothing. And so then called, emailed, sent certified letters, FedEx, I mean, everything, and didn't hear back from them. They literally just disappeared. So we ended up having to terminate them and keep their franchise fees. But I don't know what happened to them. So make sure you've got the open line of communication with the franchisor. Don't think that when you're calling them to say, hey, look, I have this problem, that they're going to immediately fine you for it. Right. And I think some of my clients think, oh my gosh, if I'm basically calling the police on myself. No. Look at them as a partnership and tell them, all right, I've got this problem. Can you help me with it? Have other franchisees faced that same issue? What have they done? And so can you provide advice and guidance on how I can get through this situation? And that's what the franchise system is supposed to do.
Yeah, definitely. Open lines of communication. You'll be assigned typically a business coach. You'll know other people in the system, and they're there to help you and support you. They want to see you be successful. That's one of the reasons why they're selling franchises, is they want to, and the discovery process is built so both sides are making an informed decision. The franchisor is making sure that you as a candidate are the right fit candidate for the system that they feel can be successful. And then the candidate is looking at the franchisor. Are they going to be a good business partner? Are they going to support me in the way that I need the support to build and grow my business? The systems are already in place. Do they have all the right systems that I feel I could be successful? And if things happen, because stuff happens all the time, like sometimes people disappear. That's a rarity.
Yes.
So that's an exception.
Strange.
I don't think there's going to be a lot of that, but so there's always exceptions. But anytime I've had clients that have had challenges with getting their business open because they can't find a space, or they can't find a contractor, or the supply chain has impacted them getting the equipment they need to open their business successfully, or funding, with the government shutdown last year, stalled a few things. So,
Yes.
things happen, and the franchisor is there to listen and work with you and come up with solutions. So you're not tattletelling on yourself. You're just coming up with problem solving together.
Exactly. Yep.
I'm opening multiple locations. Should I have one entity, one LLC or S Corp or C Corp for all of them, or should I have each individual location have their own business entity?
Great question to ask your accountant.
Very good.
Because it's about tax savings. Your liability that you face under under an LLC or corporation is pretty much the same. So look at it more for financial reasons. How can I protect myself in terms of taxes, and what's the best way to do that? And I do see a lot of my clients though setting up, a parent company, and then if they've got multiple locations, they'll have location A, B, and C as separate entities underneath that. And then the money flows up. You may have a manager that is paid out of the parent company because that manager may be rotating amongst all three locations. And so there could be some expenses that you use that the parent company pays for. And then you have the individual entities below. But you must have an individual entity for each location. You definitely want to silo that. And you don't want to have an entity that you've already used for another business. Franchisors won't allow it. If you say, all right, well, I have this LLC that I've had for the last 10 years. And, I used to dabble in photography, and then I also sold, granola bars out of my van. That's what I use the LLC for. So now I'm going to use it for this franchise. No. You got to just pay the $150 and get a new entity. Start fresh because you don't want somebody that comes out of the woodwork and says, that granola bar poisoned me, and now I'm going to sue your franchise entity. So you want to make sure that you silo the liabilities there.
Very good points, several of them. So you want to silo your liabilities, and then also build out your team that's going to support you. You've got the franchisor that's going to support you, the franchise consultant, franchise attorney, making sure you understand what you're signing, involve your CPA when you're setting up that entity, hire, oftentimes the franchisor will have a bookkeeping person to help you set up your accounting, et cetera. But who is your team around you that's going to support you in building a big business and streamline everything and make sure that you're the most profitable as possible, and lean into their expertise. You don't have to be an expert in everything.
Exactly.
So moving over to franchisors, we go through, every franchisor has to re-register their franchise disclosure document on an annual basis. Some of my clients don't understand why do they have to redo that every single year. And then there's also registration states that require additional registration at the state level. How would you explain, I guess, first let's start with the clients, because we're getting ready to head into FDD registration season, I call it. So the season, what is the liability, or why is it important for the franchisor to not communicate with franchise candidates during the registration process, particularly in those registration states?
Yeah, so you're talking about the blackout period.
Yes.
Where once they've filed to re-register their FDD or renew their FDD, they go dark and they can't sell or contact you during that time because the franchise disclosure document is in limbo. It's getting edited and revised and approved of by the various states. There are 14 registration states that take a closer look at franchise disclosure documents, and they want to make sure that those disclosure documents meet their specifications in order to sell these franchises in our state. And so during that time where the states are reviewing it, the franchisor goes through this blackout period where they cannot sell franchises to you. Really, the sales process has to stop. And that's just because the document's in flux. And the document has to be revised every year because there are new important information that's disclosed in there that may influence your decision. Throughout the year, even if it is a good, valid, and rightly issued document, if the franchisor has any material changes, maybe an executive left, maybe there's a significant change in the business model, they then have to amend the FDD, go dark again, and publish a new FDD with that new information so you're aware of it, because that could influence your decision. If an executive left, you may say, I was going to buy this franchise because this person was at the helm and I really trust them and they've done really good things at other franchise systems, or maybe they've done great things here. I really want to buy it because this person. And if they leave, then maybe that may, influence your decision not to buy. And so the FTC requires franchisors to put all that information in every year and update it so that you're aware of any changes that are made year to year.
Absolutely. You want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information to make your best, most informed decision in moving forward with the franchise. And one of the missteps that I see with emerging brands, there's some great emerging brands out there and they have great intentions, but sometimes they don't realize that they shouldn't be talking to candidates in Maryland or California or Washington or Illinois, and they're not registered. And they say the territorial check will come back and they're like, yes, we'd love to talk to your candidate. And they start talking to my candidate. And then they say, oh, well, we still have to register in that state. I'm like, oh, let's let's put the brakes on a little bit.
yeah. Pump the brakes here a little bit. Yeah. I see that too. And I let them know, hey, look, I'm not sure if their lawyer is aware of this contact that has been established. And I think you need to stop. I think they need to stop. Because you don't want to have any sort of issues with the sales process. And you just want to make sure the franchisor is following the rules and regulations. They're there to protect you. So, if they say to stop, you should stop too.
Yes. Well, and as a consultant, I've been in the industry for a little bit now, and I will talk separate to the franchisor and say, you need to let the candidate know that we shouldn't be having these conversations. I will say it on my end too, but we want a uniform front moving forward. So, it's regulations as part of the Federal Trade Commission's rules and responsibilities, as well as the states that require additional registration. So are there any current trends or regulatory trends shaping franchises that you want to share with our audience?
Well, the most recent trend that I've seen in the last FDDs that I've reviewed, and it doesn't come up as often as I would think, but it's AI restrictions and franchisors putting in clauses about how you cannot take the operations manual and upload it to ChatGPT and say, all right, I just bought this franchise. I want to maximize sales and minimize expenses. And here you go, ChatGPT, tell me what I need to do. They don't want that information uploaded and then we don't know where it goes. So I've seen probably in the last 50 of the FDDs I've reviewed, probably 5 that have included AI clauses in there. And I think that trend obviously is going to, I think we're going to see more and more of that. And then I'm curious to see how they integrate AI. These are all AI prohibitions. You can't do this with AI, but I want to see that franchisor that says, we encourage you to use AI and we encourage you to use it this particular way. I haven't seen that yet, but I'm curious to see how they're going to use that new technology.
I haven't heard that yet. So thank you for educating me on AI, and I will pay closer attention to that. Which segment of the franchise disclosure document are you seeing that AI restrictions typically?
What was that in? I think it's under 14, item 14 with patents, copyrights, and proprietary information.
Okay.
Just preventing you from disclosing essentially trade secrets and uploading it to the ether.
Well, we at Mint Franchise Consultants, we do AI in the AM on Mondays. So we talk about AI trends. We're leaning into it because AI is everywhere. A lot of people are feeling like they're downsized because of AI. We're looking at AI trends for marketing and things like that. So we'll do some education on our end about that because I haven't heard that yet. So are there any other proactive things that you would like to share with anybody considering franchising that you think are really important to pay attention to in the legal documents or otherwise before signing that franchise agreement and paying their franchise fee?
Well, I think this is probably something that you repeat a lot is is talk to franchisees. Talk to the franchisees that are ahead of you. The franchisees, not just in your state, but all over. Ask them how they like the system, what they like, what they don't like. And I've definitely found an alarming number of clients who haven't reached out to anyone and haven't even reviewed the FDD. Now, I don't think you need to read the FDD cover to cover before you talk with me. You may want to do that afterwards, after I point out the important sections and you really get a good understanding of it. But talking to franchisees, I think, is one of the most basic things that you can do. And again, you'd be surprised at how many haven't done that yet. And so I really encourage them to call as many franchisees as possible, sit in on those group calls, and then call them individually and find out what they really like, what they don't like, and how things are going, because you're going to be in that spot soon enough. Our kids were at this daycare and we had to remove them because the daycare wasn't up to par. They had a change of ownership. And there's a gentleman and his wife. She was abundantly pregnant, and he whispered under his breath, and he said, "Boy, I wish I could ask somebody what their experiences are here." And I said, "I heard that. Here, I'll give you. Here's my contact information. I'll tell you all about it." Sure. And you're going to get some really good information from the people that are there doing it. I'm reading the legal documents. I'm there to make sure that it meets all those requirements. But I've never operated this franchise before. I don't know what it's like. Talk to those who have, and get their feelings on it, and just go in there with your eyes and ears wide open, and talk and make sure you're working with the right people. Again, a consultant, hire a franchise lawyer, and you're really doing what you need to do before you invest in this opportunity, because it's a big change. It's exciting. It's scary though.
Yes.
I'm there to hopefully ease some of that anxiety and stress, so you can make more of a clear, level-headed decision. You're not worried about all these things that you don't know about. A lot of this worry comes from ignorance and the fear of the unknown. So once you do know it, you feel confident moving forward, or not moving forward, if that's your decision. Right. And I'm there to help you do that.
Well, one of my favorite questions to ask during validation speaks to both of those points. I always give my clients a list of suggested questions, and then you can go from there. You can certainly add your own questions. You don't have to ask mine, but what keeps you up at night as a franchisee? Because if you've ever been a business owner, you're going to have some sleepless nights. And
that's a great question. Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to have some wonderful days of celebrating. So you're going to go through the highs and the lows and the status quo. And so what does that look like? And then talking to the franchisor is going to probably connect you with franchisees that are performing very well and have great things to say about the franchise system. And you should certainly talk to them. But you can call anybody who's listed in item 20. All their phone numbers and contact information is provided. And talk to those who aren't performing very well. Why do you think that is? How involved are you in your business? Are you doing the day-to-day, or do you have somebody in place? Are you having a hard time hiring people, the right people? So you can get a feel for what that might look like. And then the average performers and what's going to take them to the next level. So everyone in between, I don't say, ad nauseum, we don't want to go and interview and talk to everybody, but a good size sampling of maybe 4 to 10 is usually plenty. 4 to 6 is usually what I recommend.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. When's the best time to hire a franchise attorney to review that franchise disclosure document?
So I tell my clients it's best to do the review prior to going to discovery day. So you don't feel like you're that kid in class who didn't read the assignment, and you're looking around and everybody is, flipping to page 3 and you're like, wait, I don't even have the book. So I recommend you do the review beforehand, but I get clients all the time who say, boy, I don't know if I want to buy this franchise. I'm 90% there. I want to go to confirmation day or discovery day, and really find out if I do want to move forward, because Kit, I don't want to pay your legal fee if I don't want to move forward. And I'll say, absolutely, go afterwards. You can certainly ask questions to them later on. But I think it makes you feel more confident if you know the information prior to going there. But it really doesn't matter to me. It's what you feel most comfortable with. Just make sure you get a review done.
Absolutely. And it is an investment in the review, but it's a tiny little investment compared to what you're going to be spending on the investment of the franchise system. It's probably comparable to how much it's going to cost to go to confirmation day with your
Yep.
flights and airfare and things like that. So I say in the whole scheme of things, you want to protect your investment. And the best way to do that is by working with a qualified franchise attorney like you, Kit, who can help somebody go through the franchise agreement, the franchise disclosure document, any other legal review, and make sure that they're making the most informed decision as possible to invest in a franchise. So if any of our listeners want to connect with you, I certainly have your contact information and have you and my list of trusted franchise attorneys. But how would they get a hold of you, Kit?
Yes, it's kitfranchiselaw.com. So KIT franchiselaw.com. And my email address is actually very easy too, kit@kitfranchiselaw.com. Send me an email if you would like my help. I'll let you know. I'll send you my information about my process, my fees, and then get you signed up for an initial consultation, and then get you scheduled for a review. My process is very quick. It takes me 1 to 5 days, all in. So reach out when it's most convenient for you, and I'll get you scheduled as early as possible.
Well, Kit, it's been absolutely delightful having you on the Powered by Franchising podcast today, sharing with our listeners the importance of having a in-depth legal review by a franchise expert and offering some additional insights. So happy to be part of this franchise community with you, and look forward to continuing to work with you now and in the future.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on here, Laura. I greatly appreciate it.
We'll talk soon. Thanks for tuning in to Powered by Franchising. If any of our listeners would like to connect with me, you can visit us at mintfranchiseconsultants.com. There are all sorts of downloadable resources and guides interpreting a franchise disclosure document, as well as a link to schedule time with one of our team members. Thanks again for tuning in to Powered by Franchising.